The battlefield in Ukraine has turned into a place where machines of steel and fire fight for control. Tanks roar across muddy fields, drones buzz overhead, and vehicles hide and wait for the right moment. In February 2022, when the full-scale invasion began, one of Russia's most famous weapons appeared, the T-90 tank. Russia calls it the best tank in the world. But what happens when this tank goes head-to-head with America's M1 Abrams, one of the strongest tanks ever built? Could the T-90 really trap an Abrams? And if it does, who comes out alive? Let's find out. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, the world watched in shock. Everyone thought Ukraine would fall fast because Russia brought thousands of tanks. Among them were the T-90s, Russia's pride. These tanks had big guns, heavy armor, and strange red eyes on the front. The eyes belonged to a system called Shtora, which was supposed to confuse enemy missiles. Russian TV bragged that nothing could stop the T-90. The surprising fact is, the T-90 is not a brand new tank. It is actually based on the old T-72, a design from the Cold War. Imagine painting an old car and calling it the fastest in the world. That's what Russia tried to do. At first, the T-90s rolled across Ukraine. They looked scary, rumbling through villages with their cannons pointed forward. Ukrainian soldiers with older Soviet tanks like the T-64 and T-72 were nervous. Could their outdated machines stand a chance? That question haunted everyone in those first few weeks. But then came the first big surprise. The T-90 might look powerful, but inside it hides a deadly flaw. Its ammunition, the shells for its cannon, are stored right under the crew. There's no wall to protect the soldiers from the ammo. If one shell gets hit, the whole tank explodes like a firework. The turret, the top part of the tank, can fly hundreds of feet into the air. Soldiers gave it cruel nicknames like the Jack-in-the-Box or Cosmonaut Maker. That's because when the turret flies, the crew goes with it. The weird thing is, some turrets have been seen flying almost as high as a 20-story building. This weakness was not new. Even in the Gulf War in the 1990s, Iraqi T-72s were destroyed the same way by American tanks. Yet Russia never fixed the problem in the T-90. Why? Because fixing it would mean designing a whole new tank, and that would cost billions. So they stuck with the deadly carousel system. But that was not the only problem. The T-90 is also slow in reverse. If it needs to back up to escape, it crawls. Imagine trying to run from danger, but only being able to walk backward. That is how T-90 crews often feel. So how do you fight a tank that everyone calls the best? Ukraine had an answer: the Javelin missile. This American weapon is shoulder-fired, portable, and deadly. It doesn't hit the tank's thick front armor. Instead, it flies up and smashes into the roof, where the armor is weakest. Videos showed Russian T-90s bursting into flames after being hit. The Javelin became so famous in Ukraine that people called it Saint Javelin, and even made stickers and posters about it. But here's a twist. Ukraine did not only use fancy weapons, sometimes they used old ones too. The Swedish Carl Gustaf, a weapon that is basically a big bazooka from the 1940s, destroyed a T-90M in one battle. To sum up, a 1940s-style weapon took down Russia's most advanced tank. And then came the drones. Small buzzing drones, some costing just a few $100s, dropped grenades into open hatches of T-90s. A $500 drone destroying a $5 million tank. That's the kind of crazy math that made Russian soldiers panic. By summer 2022, Russia had already lost over 100 T-90s. Remember, they can only build about 90 new ones each year. That meant Russia was losing them faster than they could replace them. Worse, many were not destroyed by Abrams or Leopards. They were killed by cheap drones, javelins, and even Bradleys. Yes, the American M2 Bradley infantry vehicle with a 25mm autocannon. The unbelievable thing is, in January 2024, a Bradley fought a T-90M. The Bradley fired its smaller gun and missiles, and the T-90M barely escaped, smoking and broken. Months later, another Bradley destroyed a T-90M with a tow missile from a mile away. That was one of the longest tank kills of the war. A vehicle designed in the 1970s beat Russia's best tank. Russia tried to respond by welding cages or sheds on top of their tanks to stop drone attacks, but these cages often failed. Some looked like they were made of scrap metal, and drones still found ways inside. So why did the best in the world tank fail so badly? The answer is more design flaws. It is also about training and leadership. Ukrainian soldiers fight with discipline, using tactics and teamwork. Russian soldiers, on the other hand, often lack training. Videos from captured Russian camps showed trash, empty bottles, and no order at all. One U.S. general compared them to the aftermath of a rock concert, not an army camp. Add corruption to the mix, Russian factories cut corners, commanders steal supplies, and soldiers get poor maintenance for their tanks. Even the T-90, built to be strong, suffers when no one cares for it. Tanks run out of fuel, break down, or are abandoned. That's why so many Ukrainians joke that Russia is their best weapon supplier, because they capture and reuse so many abandoned T-90s. The T-90's weak points are now well known: the thin turret roof, the exposed ammo, the weak reverse speed. Ukrainian drone pilots know exactly where to aim. Some fly drones right into the open hatches of T-90s. One video showed a drone flying through the driver's hatch, exploding inside and setting the whole tank on fire. A $500 drone destroyed a tank worth millions. And here's the scariest part for Russian crews. Once the tank is hit, escape is hard. Many crews don't even get the chance to jump out before the ammo cooks off. In one of the biggest humiliations for Russia, Ukraine captured working T-90Ms and drove them back into battle, this time under the Ukrainian flag. Pictures showed Ukrainian soldiers smiling as they operated the very tanks Putin had bragged about. Imagine calling something the best in the world and then watching your enemy use it against you. That's exactly what happened. In fact, Ukrainian crews even found Russian tablets taped inside T-90s to help navigate. These tanks were driven straight into traps because they followed pre-programmed GPS routes. Despite all these losses, Putin still went on TV and called the T-90M the best tank in the world. He said no one could stop it once it rolled into battle. But the battlefield told another story. T-90s burned in wheat fields. Some were abandoned by crews before a fight even started. Others were mistaken for leopards by Russian soldiers themselves, who laughed at the armor without realizing they were mocking their own destroyed tanks. Now we come back to the big question. What happens when the T-90 meets the Abrams? The Abrams is heavier, with stronger armor and better crew safety. Its ammo is stored in a separate compartment, so even if it's hit, the crew can survive. The Abrams also has better optics and can hit targets at longer ranges. But here's the twist. Abrams are not invincible either. In Iraq, insurgents destroyed some with IEDs and missiles. In Ukraine, Abrams faced drones and mines that could hurt them too. One Russian expert even claimed the Abrams could get stuck in mud, while the lighter T-90 could move better in bad weather. Is that true? Maybe. But so far, Abrams have not faced enough T-90s in Ukraine to test this claim. What we do know is this: if a T-90 tries to trap an Abrams, the Abrams has the advantage in firepower and crew protection. The first one to spot and fire usually wins, and with drones and satellites helping, the Abrams may see the T-90 before the T-90 sees it. So, could the T-90 ever beat an Abrams? In theory, yes. If it surprises it, if it fires first, if terrain favors it. But on today's battlefield, those chances are small. Drones circling above, spotting everything, missiles flying in from miles away. Tanks rarely meet in fair duels like knights. More often, they are ambushed from above or the side. The bigger truth is this: the war in Ukraine has shown that numbers and shiny weapons mean nothing without training, leadership, and smart tactics. Russia sent its amazing tanks, and Ukraine turned them into smoking wrecks. And the craziest part? In some cases, Ukrainian infantry with nothing but grenades and drones have destroyed T-90s. That means soldiers on foot beat the tank Putin called unstoppable. But this is only one piece of the puzzle. Ukraine's new armored vehicles take things to a whole other level. Click the next video and see how they shocked everyone on the battlefield.